if you got a laptop, get Vim installed if you don't already. Some of this I'm going to try to do interactively so you can follow along. I got some handouts on my website, uninnovative.net. There's a tarball or a zip file depending on what your flavor is. Download that and get it extracted, and partway through we'll play with some Vim stuff together. So the talk is From Vim Muggle to Wizard in 10 Easy Steps. A little bit about myself. My name is Erik Falor. I'm a master's student at Utah State University. I work for a company called Spillman Technologies. I've been using Vim full-time since 2003. That was a long time ago, so I was trying to get a flavor for when that was, and I looked up 2003 in Google, and this is what I found. It wasn't a great year. A lot of disappointments. So the title, like Muggles and Wizards, talking about really the divide between two different cultures of computing. On one hand, you got your Muggles. These are people I'll say are in user culture and that they use the computer. Then you got the Wizards. We're the programmers, the creators, the tinkerers. We're getting stuff done with the computer. What do you guys think are the differences between these two cultures? Knowledge? What else? What's that with guns?
Windows.
Okay, Windows. Windows users? iPad users? All right, so the way I look at it, Muggles, I don't mean to use the term too pejoratively, but you know what I mean. These are guys that use a computer for a specific purpose. They got apps, and the app does a thing, and they don't really concern themselves too much with the inner workings or how it happens. And like the user interface to them, it's just got to be easy. They don't want to have to think about it, and they don't want to learn it. Wizards, on the other hand, we understand that we're on a computer. We don't have to pretend it's a desktop or a tablet or it's got an email box, and we don't have to live under these kind of metaphors. We understand it's a machine that can literally do anything we can think of. It's just limited by our imaginations. The way we use the computer is part of our lifestyle and our identity, and we like computers to do our work for us rather than us repeatedly mashing buttons to get stuff done. So that's going to be a big theme in this talk, because Vim is a tool that helps you get a lot done. Vim is a tool that's going to make you more productive. And I want to help you think of patterns and things that you're doing in your day-to-day workflow with your text editor that really should be automated. And Vim is a wonderful platform for automating that. Now, everyone knows the scary side of Vim, the learning curve, and it's really intimidating and off-putting. What I want to do today is give you the 10 best tools, the 10 best features of Vim that work with each other. This will get you off to the races a lot faster and hopefully make that learning curve less intimidating for you. So like I said, if you haven't had a chance yet to hop on the Wi-Fi, go ahead and download my bundle, and there's a text file in there that we'll do some demos with. And while you're getting that set up, let's talk about history a little bit. Since we're in Utah, I feel a bit obligated to have a genealogy chart. So here's the Vim family tree. Vim descends from a long line of line editors. Who knows what a line editor is? Okay, so some of you guys, this is remedial. For the rest of us, a line editor was a text editor that you would use on a computer when your output device was a printer. So don't think about buttons, don't think about menus. There's none of that. It's just you're looking at one line of text at a time and you're editing that way. You're on a teletype. QED was the first one of these. It was really influential. Some really smart guys hacked on this. Dennis Ritchie and Ken Thompson, the Thompson hack. Ken Thompson, if you've looked up history, this guy's a genius. This is like totally space alien technology. 1965, he had this program. You'd use a regular expression to find your way around the file because you can't see the whole file. It prints it out one line at a time. It'd take too long. So use a regular expression to find the line of code you want to edit. His program would compile the regular expression into machine code and then run that. I mean, this is really awesome stuff. Anyways, you go down through a few years and a few different iterations of this paradigm, and they've refined it and tried to make it more user-friendly, because even these wizard guys that were making OSs back in the day found that it wasn't terribly user-friendly. Until you get down to Bill Joy in the mid-70s. He wasn't working on a teletype anymore. He had this lovely device. This was his CRT console. It was connected to the mainframe by a very slow modem link. So the problem he was trying to get over was this terrible latency. The editor just couldn't keep up with him, and it couldn't keep up with how fast he could think. Now, a couple things you'll notice about this terminal. Where's the arrow key cluster? Right? So this is why in VI today, you use the H, J, K, and L keys to move the cursor. It wasn't Bill Joy trying to be super ergonomic and saving you a lot of time. It was because that was how you move the arrow keys on this. You'd hold down the control key, and then you'd type those letters, and that's how you move the cursor. You also notice there's no escape key. Well, it's not where we normally put it. It's actually this little guy that's jutting out where our tab key is today. So for him to switch out of a different mode, it was just like hitting the tab key. So it wasn't like going clear up here and doing that sort of thing. A lot of Vim hackers will actually make their caps lock key be an extra escape key because it just makes a lot more sense. But why are we still using a program 40 years later that was designed for technology that's just so obsolete? Why is it stuck around? Just inertia? I say no. I say Bill Joy got it right without even trying. The design decisions he hit on were accidentally awesome, and because of that, Vim has been around for about 40 years, and I'm confident something like it's going to be around for another 40 years, because it's just rad. So let's talk about what makes a good UI. What Tom Cruise is doing here is not good user interface, this is aerobics. A lot of people will actually hold up VI as a program that does it wrong. It's not discoverable. It doesn't have tool tips or little hints that guide you along. There's no GUI, like you can't use your mouse and highlight text that way. It's got all these weird cryptic commands, right? Because we're all used to Control C being copy, because copy starts with C, and then Control X is cut because cut starts. X looks like scissors, right? So you cut with scissors, and then Control paste or Control V for paste because I guess the V is like a down arrow and you're pasting stuff down, and then Control Z. Okay, right? So none of them are terribly intuitive. It's just what are you used to, right? And most people just happen to be used to the Control C, Control X stuff. But once you figure out the logic behind the way Vim commands are put together, it makes an awful lot of sense. And finally, the worst sin of them all, it's a modal editor. And modal programs are horrible. So says Jeff Raskin. Right? There's a cause of constant errors, confusion, unnecessary restrictions, and complexity in interfaces. I really think his main criticism was that it didn't tell you what your mode was, but modern Vim does. But actually, when you understand what the tool is trying to do and you use the modes to your advantage, it actually makes your system a lot easier to use because you're not overloading lots of keystrokes with different meanings at the same time. You have a distinct separation of process from application, and when they do the right thing in the right context, you get a lot more out of your 100 and so keys on your keyboard. All right, so even though VI does everything wrong according to the experts, there's probably more people using VI today than any point in history. Now, the experts that design UIs think about what kind of a user they're trying to target. All right, they're trying to target the little kid that can just pick up an iPad and get something done without being formally trained. That's not a bad thing. That's not a bad place to start. But there comes a point when it's time to grow up and use a bigger tool, a better tool that fits your more mature needs maybe, because now you're at a point when you need to get the computer to do more stuff. On this little chart here, we got the Notepad user. He comes up to speed really fast, but what's the difference between a person that's been using Notepad for a couple of weeks and a guy that's been using Notepad for a few years? You don't get really good at Notepad. There's just not that much there. VI, on the other hand, yeah, there's a little bit of a learning curve at the first. It's like riding a bicycle. Once you've committed the commands to muscle memory and you don't think about it anymore, it's not a burden to you. It's not holding you back. But because you can compose the commands, because you can take these concepts and meld them together and combine them, you can get so far ahead with your productivity versus a traditional editor that it makes the cost very much worth it. And if you're using a tool as long as any of us probably expect to be in our careers, that's a lot of gain. That's a lot of benefit for you. Experts are designing for this guy. He really doesn't have a clue what's going on. But we talk about these humane interfaces, but if you think about it, they're really designed for someone with 3 arms. You got 2 hands on the keyboard, then you need a 3rd hand to type. Use your mouse while you're trying to type, or else you're switching. I know personally, I don't think you can call it a humane interface when it's designed for someone that doesn't have, Homo sapien physiology, but that's just me. VI, on the other hand, unlocks your potential. You're going to be a text editing cyborg in no time. So we're going to get you started with the 10 best tips. Now, the first ones I want to start with, these are things that derive from VI's line editor heritage. This is the really obsolete stuff that a lot of people say we should forget about because we're not in the 70s anymore. But this is actually some of the best stuff that VI has to offer. First one of these are regular expressions. How many of you are conversant with regular expressions? Okay. Vim, their dialect of regular expressions are a little bit different from Perl's or some of the ones that are in the standard programming languages. So there's going to be a little bit of rough edge here, but the benefit's great. You have a lot of ground to gain, a lot of things that computers are really good at that the computer should be doing for you are unlocked through regular expressions. You can find things, right? We use computers to find stuff for us all the time. It's a major business model for a lot of these websites. Count how many times something's in your file. Make lots of tedious little changes, but you don't do the tedium. You let the computer do the tedium. That's what computers are good at, right? All right, so let's talk about our demo file. So if you downloaded that, pop that open, find the section 0 here. What I got here is a question. I want to find out how many times is the word Jabberwock in my file. Well, the naive Vim user would probably put the cursor on it and hit the asterisk to do a search, and then just hit N and count how many times until he repeats and loops to the top. Right, so to do that, I had to mash the key N times. That's an order N operation. We can do so much better than that. Let's do a substitute command, but I don't really want to substitute. This is just a little bit of a hack that's abusing some of Vim's features. Now, one thing I want to tell you before I really get going on this, I got a couple of shortcuts in my VimRC that speed things up for me. So if you see something looks confusing, that's what I'm doing. They're also in the download bundle, so you want to definitely check this out. One of them is if I go into command line mode and I hold down Alt and type V, it'll cut and paste the line of text I'm on and put it into the command line mode, so I don't have to make an embarrassing typo in front of you guys as we get going. So that's all I'm doing here. All right, so that tells me now at the bottom of the screen there's 8 matches and they're on 8 different lines of text. So I didn't have to manually keep track of anything or scan through the file myself. I let Vim do it. The G flag at the end, the G flag tells it to find all the matches on each line, but the N flag says, hey, don't really do the substitution. It's a no-op. So that's how I abuse it to get it to count for me. Now, I'll tell you something that's maybe a little bit embarrassing, but I feel comfortable around you guys. One of my hobbies is Lewis Carroll, George Lucas fanfic. So I take Lewis Carroll poems. I don't really like the nonce words that he used. I prefer the George Lucas made-up words. So I replace the Lewis Carroll words with George Lucas words. And I don't know, I think it's got a nice ring to it. It's just kind of a community I'm into. So Jabberwocky's a great poem, but I think it'd be better if it was about midi-chlorians. Right? Who knows what a borrow-gove is? Right? Does anyone know what a midi-chlorian is? Okay, so like instantly you've got that kind of connection. You know what he's talking about all of a sudden. So I could read it and manually retype it in every time, but that's fraught with peril. Let's make my editor do it for me. So I'll just run this command. Bam, 4 borogroves are dead, replaced with midi-chlorians. This poem's getting somewhere. At the end of each of these sections, I have the help file command that you can use to learn more about that topic. Vim is awesome. It's got really great built-in help, so you should read it. So basically, regular expressions, they're going to do the stuff that computers are good at, so you don't have to. Let's talk about marks. Not those kind of marks. Marks are like bookmarks. They help you keep track of stuff in your file. It's not like a textual thing that gets inserted into the file. It's just a location that's internal to Vim. But as soon as we can mark a location so that I can remember to go back to that location, well, my editor knows about that location, so I can just tell my editor to refer to that location to do particular operations. Now, what you're looking at right here, this is actually traditional VI. This is the source code that Bill Joy wrote that's been ported to run on Linux. So you can actually run a 39-year-old text editor on your modern laptop if you want to. So to set a mark, you use the M command in normal mode. Then you give it the name of the mark. So there's 26 alphabetical letters, so there's 26 marks you can have. So you can keep track of 26 different locations in your file if you're so inclined. You can give them a somewhat mnemonic name if you want to remember where they're at. If you use a capital letter for the name of your mark, in Vim, that'll refer to a mark in your particular file. So as you're jumping around to other files, you can refer back to your A mark and it'll take you back to the location in the original file. Otherwise, they're just kind of local on a per file basis. Now, the other cool thing about marks is that Vim's actually been setting a bunch of marks for you, and you probably didn't even know about it. So let's start using those. If I make some changes, if I edit some text, or I paste some text, or delete some text, Vim's going to delimit that region of text I changed with the square brace marks. So you can use that. You paste a bunch of text in, and you can use those marks to tell VI to do some operation over that piece of text. The angle bracket marks, whenever you enter visual mode, Vim's going to delimit that region with those marks. So even after you've exited visual mode and you've gone way far away in the file, you're not even looking at that area again. Technically, it's still selected in the sense that you can tell Vim to do something with it. So that's really cool. Start using it because Vim's been setting those for you all along. Now, X commands, this is where it really gets interesting. These are the commands that came from the line editor heritage. Back then, when you were in the line editor, you couldn't just start typing and editing your file because, well, if you had to tell the editor to do something and you started typing and it went into your file, now your file's getting mixed up with commands. So they had a separate command mode that you'd enter. In VI, we use the colon key to introduce that you're going from regular move the cursor about mode into I'm going to tell the editor to do something. Using the marks and regular expressions we've already talked about, we can apply these to parts of the file with sniper-like precision. So, got a line of text here. We'll use that in a minute. How do we tell VI what we're talking about? Well, we can give it a line number. We can tell it with the dot, the current line. We can use the $sign to mean the end of the file. So we could say to Vim, take something and move it to the end of the file. We use patterns, so regular expressions, and etc. So let's do an example here. I've got some text I'm going to mark. Let's say I want to mark this line. All right. So I'm going to come down here and I'm going to do this substitution where I'm going to move this Vim help range command. I'm going to move it back to the line I marked with mark A. So if I do, well, let me tell you how to jump to a mark first. If I mark a line of text with M and then the name of the mark, I can use the single quote to instantly jump back there. No matter where I'm at in the file, it'll jump me back there. But now what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell Vim, find the line of text that begins with help range and move it to the place where mark A is. No, that's setting the mark. Getting ahead of myself. Here's where we're going to move stuff around. Let's do this. Okay, so take the line at mark A and move it down until after the line that begins with fortunately. So right there, I moved it right before the line fortunately. So what this does here is I find the line fortunately, then back up a line. Now let's do something else. Let's take the line that begins with for example. I'm going to move it 3 lines after fortunately. So as soon as I run this, for example is, here's this line, 1, 2, 3, and then it's the line after that. Now, coming from a traditional text editor perspective, you're looking at this and going, what the heck are you doing, Eric? That's really weird. Why would I ever do that? And for a long time I used Vim without doing this stuff. But once I realized you can combine these simple concepts that I already understood, and I could tell Vim to do stuff, I realized I wasn't mashing a lot of keys or trying to keep my cursor where I was doing work. I could tell Vim to do stuff that was off the screen. And what that means, I was saving time. I wasn't manually looking around for stuff in the file. Vim's got a pretty good idea what I'm talking about as long as I can tell Vim what I want it to do. And that's all this is. It's just a way to tell your editor what you're getting at. Now, here's a better example of something that would be very, very tedious and difficult to do manually, but Vim can do it really fast. So I told you about my George Lucas, Lewis Carroll crossover fanfic, and some user on my account, or on my computer with the guest account got on there, and they thought they'd play a trick and they deleted all. I guess they didn't appreciate fine art or something. Well, they didn't cover their tracks too well. They used the exploit to gain root privileges so they could delete my account, but they didn't remember to clean up their bash history file. So now I got this file, it's got timestamps, and I can find the command that they ran, but it was the guest account. So how do I know which actual person it was that was logged into guest? Well, if I can correlate the timestamp to the last log, I'll know who logged on at that time, and I have a pretty good idea who I need to ban from my system. But these timestamps are kind of hard to read. I'm not a cyborg, really, so I can't read these. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to have Vim go through this chunk of text from their bash history file and translate all the timestamps into something that Erik can read. So that's what this gnarly looking command does. Trust me, it'll work. Bam. So for this region of text, I've got all these commands are now at the readable timestamp. So what I did is I said, from my current line +2, that's right here, all the way until I get to the line that says vim star.scm, run this substitution command that's going to basically pull out the dates in Unix format, convert it into a string representation, and then put it back in. So I'll just come down here. Okay, LSL, my directory. They ran and compiled the shell code. They deleted the shell code. The shell code must have been what deleted it. So I can tell around Cinco de Mayo, around noon, whoever logged in is the culprit. So now I know who I need to ban. Now another thing, let me show you this real quick. This is a cool thing I should have told you. Command line mode, What are your key bindings like when you're typing that command line? It's not quite like VI, right? Wouldn't it be great if you could use VI stuff in the command line? Well, you can. You hit Control F when you're in there. It pulls up your command history, so the last so many commands, but they're in a Vim buffer. So all the stuff you can do to your main text in your main text buffer, you can do to your command lines too. So you can reuse and recompose and just hash up your commands, and that saves a lot of time. So that's a really cool tip. Control F. Then what you do is you hit Enter, and it executes the command as you edited it. Alrighty then. So registers. Who knows what a register is? Probably know this as a cut and paste buffer from other programs. VI and Vim have been putting text into your registers for you while you work all along. So this is another one of those great things that's probably been going on without your awareness all along. Another great thing about these is once you've got some text in the buffer, Vim can just use that as though it was commands that you typed in yourself. So this is the macro system in VI. You can record keystrokes. You can, in effect, show VI what you want it to do. Then you can tell it to go back and do it again. And again and again and again, because computers are really good at that sort of thing. So there's a few registers that you need to know about. The default one, if I just say delete that line of text, I can bring it back by doing double quote and then the name of the register, in this case double quote. So you got the double quote register as your default one, then a paste command. If I yank text, it goes into the double quote register, but it also goes into the number 0 register. As I'm deleting text, though, sometimes it's kind of nice to get that text back because deleting is a destructive operation. But if I deleted 2 lines, what happened to the first line I deleted a minute ago? Well, it's actually in a different register. There's 9 numbers on your keyboard after 0. So registers 1 through 9 are like a stack of cut registers. If you delete stuff, you've got at least 9 of them kept around, so you can paste those back in. That allows you to do some pretty complicated edits very easily. Let's see, so down here I wanted to show you something about macros. So if you're following along, I'm down about line 370. So what I'm going to do, line 400, I got some gnarly looking text. This is just Vim commands. This is something I typed in once. What I'm going to do is I'm going to load this up into a register A. So the way I'll do that is I'll say Y for yank, double quote A, nope, not double quote A, nope, double quote A yank. Okay, so you give it the name of the register, double quote A, then you tell it what you want to do. I'm going to yank it to the end of the line, so let's double quote A, yank, end of the line. So now that text is in my register. So what I started doing is I was writing a mail merge, I was writing some letters to my friends, and I was giving them personalized greetings and salutations, but I got looking at it and realized they're probably a little bit too honest and maybe I should just sanitize it and go with something bland. So I had a whole bunch of these lines of text. Hello there, young fellow. Hello there, buff fellow. And I had a bunch of these. I didn't want to change them all manually because that's what a Muggle would do. And let's face it, I got better things to do with my time. So I'm going to tell Vim to do this for me. Once I've got the text loaded up in my register, I say @A, and it's going to replay the text as though I had typed it in, and it's going to do whatever that command would have done. So right here, what do we got? 0, that moves my cursor to the 0th column. 3 W's, that moves me over 3 words. Then I change a word into my good. Then I got an escape character here, so I get out of insert mode. And then I got a J after that, which moves me down a line. I did it this way because I can just say really quickly, I don't have to type too many buttons, but it's going to keep doing the same thing over and over again and put me back right where I need to be. Well, I just pushed a button 6 times. We can do better than that. One thing I can do is I can give it a count, right? So once I've run a macro once, the next time I want to run the macro, I don't have to say @A again. My finger's already on the @ sign. I can just say @, right? And VI remembers what my last macro was, so it just replays that. But then, I don't want to keep mashing a key like a Muggle, because I told you earlier that's what you don't want to do. I can tell VI to do this so many times until it gets done. So here I know I got 6 lines, so I can say 6 @ It's going to replay that macro 6 times. That's all well and good if you know how many times you need to run it, but what if you don't know how many times you got to run it? Well, you just make up a big number. When it gets to the end of the file, it runs into an error, it'll quit, and then you're done. Easy as that. So the idea with the macro, the idea with these registers, they're really handy for moving text around, but the real power comes from the fact that they're code. Vim can run them. All right, so let's talk about languages now. How many of you realize that VI is a language? It's not just a collection of really weird commands, but it's actually like a language. There's a whole bunch of new editors coming out that are really, the UI is there, the UI is beautiful, but to me they kind of miss the mark in that they're still basically a traditional editor, and they still for the most part get you to do a lot of repetitive, tedious stuff that, as wizards we should be above doing that. We should make the computer do that stuff, right? But I gotta admit, they do look pretty. They're good looking editors, but for the most part you're using the mouse to communicate what you want the computer to do. I mean, does that really work all that well? There's UI guidelines that tell you when you're making buttons on a program or a web page, you need the button to be so big so it's easy for people to click on. But if you're like me and you're running a text editor with a little teeny tiny font so you can see everything, now you're expecting me to put my cursor right on the right character all the time. It doesn't happen. This is why I like the way that VI does things. It's super precise. It does exactly what you want with sniper-like precision because you're telling you unambiguously exactly what to do. But this is the main reason that no other editor is going to replace what VI does, because VI is a language. It's a very simple language too, and I think after I show you this, you'll understand that these really weird commands, they're not that weird after all. There's three things in this language. You've got a count, you've got an operation, and you've got a motion. The count's the easy one, but it's one that we probably overlook too much. When you go buy, if you're like me, you go to the grocery store and you buy a stack of Hungry Man, because I'm no good at cooking and Swanson does a better job than me anyways. Well, if I buy a bunch of these and the checkout lady's checking them out, she doesn't scan them one by one. She says I got 5 beer-battered fish Hungry Mans, and she just types in 5 and then scans the first one. Okay, so if our checkout registers have the technology to not make people do repetitive tasks, shouldn't your text editor? The operator, this is probably the thing that you're most familiar with. If you're in VI or Vim and you type a command, but you need to type a second character to make it finish it. So a good example of this is DD to delete a line, YY to yank a line, because it takes 2 characters. The first part is the operation, and the second part is the motion that tells it what to do this operation over. This is the really brilliant thing that Bill Joy came up with, because he had that really slow modem link. It took a long time to hit the arrow key over a whole bunch of times to get the cursor from here to there. Well, why not say, I need to go 3 words over. I can just say 3 and then W for word, and then the cursor moves over a word. Well, the next obvious extension of that idea is if as a human I've got words and concepts and ideas for certain shapes and items in my text file, why can't my text editor also be aware of those concepts? So anything that moves your cursor is a motion. So you got a set of motions that deal with things like paragraphs and words and lines, but things like marks, regular expressions, your arrow keys for that matter, these things are motions that will move the cursor. These are things that will tell VI what you mean when I say I want to delete something. Now, this is another quote from Jeff Raskin. He says, "The computer shall not waste your time or require you to do more work than is strictly necessary." Now, presumably you're here because you're VI users, but ask yourself, how much time are you wasting doing something that, strictly speaking, you probably didn't need to do? And if you're using a text editor for years and years and years, then that can add up to a lot of time. But more importantly, you're going to feel awesome when you're powering through stuff, you're finding the right line in the file, and your colleagues are probably scrolling around, messing with the scroll bar trying to find it, and you're going to be done with that already. Now, this is great stuff. So the key takeaway from this, if you don't remember anything else about this, is just COM, count, operator, motion. Once you look at Vim's commands through that lens, it demystifies it, and it makes a lot of sense. Well, let's talk about the future. Vim's been around for a long time, but where is it going? So for a long time, about 23 years in fact, Bra Molinar has been the BDFL of the Vim project, and he's grown it into one of the most successful and widespread open source projects. I mean, Vim builds and runs on so many computers. I just love it because any weird Unix system I get on, even some weird non-Unix systems I get on, I can be confident that Vim's going to be runnable, which is a great thing because that's a big part of my environment. But there's been some friction. Over the years, he's gotten burned by people putting in these must-have features, and then they disappear. So he gets to maintain all this code. It's grown organically. It's gotten to be a bit of a mess. So last year, a developer named Thiago de Arruda decided to do something about it, and he started a fork called Neovim. And the idea is to refactor it so it's a cleaner code base. It's got more modern features that people are expecting these days. It's still an alpha at this point. It really only works on Unix systems, and it's only in the console mode. But they're making a lot of progress. If you would have asked me about Neovim a few months ago, I was kind of dismissive back then, but I can see now that they're really getting somewhere with it, and they're doing a lot of really cool things. So I invite you to take a look at it and check it out. In fact, some of the times I drop into Vim, I'll actually be running Neovim. See if you can tell the difference, because at this point I can't. But they got a GitHub, so check it out and build it. It's kind of fun. All right, let's talk about external tools, external programs on your system. How many of you know when you're on a Unix system and you know just what to do to save the day? My heroes. Okay, one of the design decisions of Vim, and this explains why there's a lot of features not in Vim, like they don't have a text console built into Vim like a lot of editors do. It's because Vim was designed from the ground up to be a part of a larger system, okay? The nice thing about this is that this rewards you for actually understanding how to do stuff on Unix. So the VI way to do stuff is to work in harmony with other tools on your system. So first of all, let's read in a file. We can use the R command to bring in text into my file. But as we know on Unix, we try to make everything look like a file and everything act like a file. So if we run the read command, but we put an exclamation point for the name of the file that we want to run, but we actually put a command in there, then we're going to run that command, take its standard out, and that's now in my buffer. So let's see if I want to see how many types of source code files that Vim can highlight out of the box. 582 more lines. I always get a kick out of other text editors when you go to the syntax highlighting menu and there's a few dozen entries, and I think that's cute. Okay, 582 different types of syntax that just vanilla Vim can highlight right out of the box. If I had internet, I could just run a NS lookup on Openwest and get their IP address, but I couldn't get on Wi-Fi. But say I'm writing a script that for some reason I needed their IP address, and I didn't know what it was. Well, I could just run it. I wouldn't have to open up another Xterm. I wouldn't have to go to Google or what is my IP address or anything like that. I could just run it within my text editor, really blurring the line between text in a file and just text that could be generated arbitrarily on my system. Well, what if I want to go the other way? What if I want to take some text that's in my buffer, push it out to a program, have it do some processing on it, and then pull that back in? Well, that's easily achieved with the exclamation point command. I can say on this line, run this command, or run the text on this line through a command that I tell it. So it's going to take the range of text I give it and pipe it out to that command standard in, and then the standard out comes back into my file. So what I can do here is run figlet on some text, or I can say I'm going to run calsay on whatever content I have on this line here, right? If I had internet, I could grab this chunk of text and send it up to a paste bin. This really is a handy thing when I'm trying to explain to somebody how to do something in my vimrc config file or whatever. I can just highlight the text, shove it up to paste bin. In my buffer, I get the URL that the paste is at, and I can just tell him to go there. Then he can see my config file or a piece of a log file or whatever I'm looking at. Now this is something that I do so often. I'll actually write out a command like I would enter at the command prompt, and I want the output of that command to be part of my input file. So I actually made a mapping for this. What I do is I have the capital Q key. It runs this command down here. Capital key, I say bang bang sh, and then hit enter. What that does is the bang bang command takes my current line of text and it treats it like it's a command that I just run on the shell. And it runs it, and then whatever output it generates comes back into my file. So, bam, one keystroke, I can make my text awesome. Now say I want to get a list of all the users on my system, right? So I just hit Q, right there in my text file, I got a list of all the users on my system. That's pretty cool. How much battery life do I got? What's the prime factorization of two of my favoriteest numbers? Now, say my iCloud account got hacked again, I got to change my password. So, bam, right? Now say I want to do something a little bit more esoteric, something that's a little bit trickier to do, but totally doable on the command line if you're a Unix guru, right? I want to make a hexadecimal times table, because I saw that one episode of, what was that, the Silicon Valley show where the guy had the times table memorized, but he totally had the wrong number. Did you guys see that clip on YouTube? It's kind of funny. He goes in this whole thing with hexadecimal and he did it wrong. Well, I don't want to be that guy. I want to actually know the thing. So I know if I have a sequence from 0 to 255, I run it through printf and I tell it to represent them as hexadecimal numbers. That's going to give me all the numbers, but it's not a times table yet. But I know if I run it through format, and you do a little bit of math, right? There's going to be 16 items on a line of the times table. They're 2 characters wide, and they got a space in between them, and there's a new line at the end. That's only 49 things. So we'll just run that. There's my times table. Look at that. Already in my text file, right where I wanted it anyways, okay? So there's a couple of a blog series that this one man wrote that explains how to make VI fit in with all the other text processing utilities on your Unix system, basically make it into an IDE. That's definitely worth a read because he explains this stuff beautifully, and once you get the hang of this sort of thing, you'll be surprised how much interesting and time-saving stuff you can do with it. Alright, so the takeaway here is put this in your vimrc file, okay? Just type a command in the file and you run it and put it right back in there. It's awesome. Okay, let's talk about doing the splits. Doesn't have to be awkward. Vim's very window flexible. Some editors, some big IDEs, they'll do stuff like you can split the window in half, or you can split it in half this way, and that's kind of cute, but that's not nearly enough, right? What if I want to look at the same file in 4 or 5 different locations? I want to see 5 things at once. You can do that in Vim. It's super easy. And then how about moving your cursor between the panes, because you're probably not going to be using the mouse to highlight over here or to go into this window. Well, use the familiar H, J, K, and L keys that you're moving around your file with. Control W, H, J, K, and L, and you're going to move the cursor where you want it to go. So here I got my file split into 2 places. Control W, J takes me to the window down here. To make a split, you do Control W, S. To make a vertical split, Control W, V. I can just do this ad infinitum if I want to, but I don't want to. Control W, O will make your current window the only one. Or you can do Control W, C to close the one you're in. So either way you want, you can look at 2 files at the same time, or 2 places in the same file. What if you want to compare stuff? Wouldn't it be nice if Vim could compare things for you? Well, of course it does that. It's got a diff mode. What I got on the left is the original Lewis Carroll version of Jabberwocky. Then I got mine that's going to be released in stunning 3D, courtesy George Lucas. And everything that I've changed is highlighted. All the lines that I've changed are different color. You can see I've replaced the Jabberwock with Jar Jar Binks, because if anybody needs to be decapitated, it's that guy. All right, let's talk about visualization, visualizing things, visual mode. This is a really handy way to see what the effect of your operation is going to be, because you can highlight it ahead of time. It's also the only way to select a rectangular block of text. This is something that a lot of editors are doing nowadays with multiple cursors, and this is something that we've been able to do in Vim for decades, because you just do it, right? So one of the things I'll do is you want to rename all these instances of a variable. So they'll put a cursor on each line, and then you start typing. Okay. I can do that too. Another thing that you might be able to do is you want to change the expression in an indexing expression in an array. So I can say I plus, easy peasy. All the other stuff that people tend to do with multiple cursors, the substitute command that Vim already has fills that quite nicely. When you're editing a chunk of text, you got a selection that's in visual mode. You don't use the I in the A command to put your cursor at the beginning of that and start appending or inserting text in front of that. The concept is the capital I command moves your cursor to the beginning of the line and edits. When you're in visual block mode, capital I does that, but to the block. So if you've got a rectangle selected and you're hitting I and wondering why you're not in insert mode, think that you need to go to the beginning of the whole block. So you're inserting at the beginning of the block, not inserting where your cursor is. And that's why that's that way. All right, so let's talk about being lazy. Who knows the 3 virtues of being a good programmer? You got laziness, hubris, and impatience. Thank you. Okay, so these are things that make you good at an editor, good at programming, good at life, I think, being lazy. Can you tell my wife that? So when you're editing a file, you got a couple different ways to do completion. Control N will just complete on words that are already in your files. Control X, Control F will complete on file names. So how many times have you written a program that refers to a specific file only to find it doesn't work because you had a typo in the file name? You don't have to do that anymore because Vim will find it for you. Control X, S. If I'm in insert mode, I type Control X, S. It's going to complete on spelling suggestions. So if you're a bad speller, it can fix that for you. If you're in the command line down here, I can start typing something and do Control X, Control V, and now I got completion on all the different Vim commands that are possible. Control X, Control L. So I'm going to say help, Control X, Control L. I'm going to complete lines of text somewhere in my file. So if you need to copy a whole line of text, that's a quick way to do it. Just start typing it and Control X, Control L. All right, so let's talk about how to learn stuff, how to learn Vim Foo. It's not as easy as jacking into the matrix. It takes a little bit of work. But be like my man Tom Haverford. A little bit of work now is good because then you can ball a lot later. It's definitely worth it. The thing I find with a lot of people that say they're good at VI, they get to a certain point on the curve when they kind of quit learning new stuff. The thing that I found that really works is pick a new feature every week and just go out of your way to use it and just try to use it. Either it's going to work and you'll click, or else it doesn't fit your style and you forget about it, but that's okay. There's plenty of features. You'll never run out of things to do. Usually people quit though when they get to the point where they discover the dot operator that repeats what they just did, and they think, oh, I'm a text editing god, I don't have to do anything anymore. Well, yeah, you're better than Notepad, but you're not fulfilling your full potential. But as we're getting started in Vim, if this is all new to you, I recommend the cold turkey method. Just dive into it, tell a bunch of people you're going to do it so you can't wuss out, and then just stick with it for a month. If after a month you're not typing :X at the end of everything everywhere, maybe Vim's not for you, but it'll probably be for you. All right, so if you don't remember anything else from what I've talked to you about today, I want you to remember this one thing. This is the one thing that I find a lot of people don't know about Vim, but this is really the best thing about it, and the one thing that'll make it so that no other editor is really going to replace it, because I don't know how anyone else could even do this sort of thing. Right, text objects. I talked before about how Bill Joy realized that you got different concepts, different structures in your text that the editor should know about. Text objects takes that and turns it up to 11. We've got quoted string literals in our files. We've got different bracketed expressions. We've got XML tags and blocks of code. If we've got names and ideas and concepts for these sorts of things, why doesn't your text editor? This is textual structure. Your text editor should know about this stuff. In the count operator motion scheme of things, text objects, they're kind of like a motion because they tell Vim what you want to do, what region you want to do it in, but they don't move the cursor by themselves. And I think this might be why a lot of people don't know about them. So what I got here is I got a little bit of JavaScript. I got a bracketed expression, I got some parentheses. So if I want to do something like visualize the parentheses, I say V for visualize, I say I for inside, then I type one of the parentheses, and then it highlights everything in the parentheses. Same thing for this curly brace. I want to visualize within the curly brace. If I want to visualize everything in that bracketed expression, I can just say curly brace. There's an XML tag outside of this. I can say AT, and it'll highlight a tag. The difference between the I and the A is that the I is going to highlight or delete or change or whatever you tell it to do within the delimiter. If you use the A, it's going to include the delimiter itself. Now, I don't really care for JavaScript or XML, so for me, my favorite command is DAT, which just deletes that whole tag. It actually makes Vim a very good XML editor when you have to do that, because it's a hierarchical tree. You just put your cursor somewhere within the tag that you want it to do something with, somewhere in the tag, and just DAT, and bam, it's gone, just like that. So just remember, in Vim, it's really easy to delete all the XMLs. All right, so Tim O'Reilly said this, like a lot of things about Unix, VI only seems difficult. Hopefully today, after showing you some of these things, you can understand that Vim's got a lot going on, but the pieces all fit together, they mesh together, they're a complete whole, and when you compose them and put them together, there's a lot of power there and a lot of efficiency to be gained, and it reinforces what you know. If you use a concept over here and you're using it over here, really quickly it's muscle memory. You don't have to think about it anymore, and once you stop thinking about what you're doing, it's not a burden anymore, and that whole learning curve stuff's a distant memory. So pick a new thing, try it out. It's muscle memory, or else you're just not going to use it. Maybe come back to it later and it'll make sense to you then. But before we part, so you've come to the end of this journey, you've got your wizarding hat and I guess a crystal ball for some reason, but you're a Vim wizard now. There's one last piece of advice I want to leave you with. Emacs sucks. Thank you guys.